The last thing we want to do here is to notify our subscribers when the state of the store gets changed. As I told you in the last lesson, these subscribers are UI components that are interested to know when the state of the store gets changed. So before we dispatch an action, we should be able to subscribe to the store and pass a function. This function gets called every time the state of the store gets changed. So here, let's do a console.log and say store changed. Now let's go ahead and implement the subscribe method. So first we declare a function, subscribe, that takes a listener. This listener is a function, so we can call it like this, right? However, we don't want to call this function immediately because when we subscribe to the store, this function does not get called immediately. It should be called later on when the state of the store gets changed. So here we want to declare an array of listeners. When we subscribe, we're going to push this new listener to our array of listeners. Now, why an array? Because we can have multiple listeners. We can have multiple UI components subscribing to our store. So listeners.push listener. Okay. Now let's expose this new function. So we add it over here. And finally, when we dispatch an action, here we're going to notify our subscribers or listeners. That is very easy. We write a simple for loop. For I set to 0, as long as it's less than listeners, the length. We're going to do I++. Here we get the listener at this index and call it. As simple as that. Let's test our implementation. So save the changes. Now you can see our store got changed. Beautiful. So this is Redux in a nutshell. If you look at the source code of Redux, you're going to see the same structure, but with a bit more code that involves some validation. For example, when dispatching an action, here we're not validating the action object. In Redux, we have some validation code that ensures the action object has a type property. Our implementation doesn't have this kind of validation. That is why it's a bit shorter, but the concept is exactly the same. So as we can see, Redux is a very simple concept and library. In the next section, we're going to talk about debugging Redux applications.